Why are you wearing my wife's necklace? Daniel Romano's voice shook the entire private dining room, a question filled with rage, and something dangerously close to hope. His restraint lasted less than a second. Take it off, he demanded sharply, stepping closer, the controlled composure he was known for cracking under something raw and deeply personal. Take it off right now. Nina froze, confused and suddenly afraid she had unknowingly broken some unspoken rule of this elegant world she barely belonged to. I don't understand, she stammered, instinctively placing her fingers over the sapphire resting against her collarbone. This necklace is mine. I've worn it since I was a child. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. Do you think this is funny? He said, his voice lowering into something far more dangerous than shouting. That necklace is not fashion jewelry. That necklace belongs to a family older than this city. Nearby guests turned subtly in their seats, careful not to stare, but unable to ignore the tension spreading through the room like an approaching storm. Obsidian Hall was a place where older patrons appreciated dignity, measured conversation, and the quiet confidence of tradition. Tonight, tradition itself seemed to be under attack. You will answer me honestly, Daniel continued, each word deliberate, controlled, yet cutting, because if you are lying, you are wearing something you should never have touched. Nina's pulse raced. She had never been confronted like this before. Certainly not by a man whose presence seemed to command silence without effort. I'm not lying, she said quickly, her voice trembling. I've had this necklace my entire life. Daniel let out a short, humorless breath. That necklace, he said coldly, is a Romano family heirloom. It is not sold. It is not replicated. It is not worn by strangers. Victor Hale, standing slightly behind Daniel, observed the exchange with careful attention. His calm demeanor remained intact, but his eyes moved with calculation, absorbing every word, every reaction. Daniel, Victor said smoothly, maintaining polite composure expected in refined company. Perhaps the design is similar. Antique pieces often resemble one another. Daniel ignored him. His gaze remained fixed on Nina. The sapphire, he said, pointing slightly, is cut in a pattern commissioned by my wife's family generations ago. Every authentic piece bears a private mark, a symbol, not visible to casual inspection. Nina swallowed. She felt suddenly as if she had stepped into a conversation she had not been invited to, yet somehow could not leave. I didn't know any of that, she said quietly. This necklace was with me when I was adopted. Daniel's eyes sharpened. You expect me to believe that my family heirloom ended up in the possession of a stranger working a service shift? I'm not a thief, Nina replied, the first trace of wounded dignity entering her voice. Then prove it, Daniel said immediately. His tone had turned harsher, the grief beneath his anger pushing him further than he intended. Because right now, he added, you are either part of something very elaborate, or standing in the center of something you do not understand. Nina hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the pendant. I can show you, she said finally. Carefully, she unclasped the necklace and placed it in Daniel's hand. The sapphire caught the warm amber light, illuminating deep blue tones that seemed almost alive beneath the surface. Daniel turned the pendant slowly. Then he saw it. Inside the platinum setting, nearly invisible without close inspection, was the mark. A small engraved crest, an old European family symbol used only for bloodline jewelry. If this revelation surprised you as much as it surprised Daniel, share your thoughts in the comments where you are watching this video. Tell us what you believe the truth behind the necklace really is. Like this video if you enjoy stories about hidden justice and powerful family secrets. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story that reveals how truth always finds its way to the surface. Not a brand, not a jeweler's signature, a lineage identifier. His breath caught. The same crest existed on Isabella's necklace. Both pieces were created decades earlier, as part of a private family commission. Two matching heirlooms, never sold publicly, never catalogued, never discussed outside the family. Daniel's pulse quickened. He had known Isabella's necklace was an heirloom passed down from her mother's side, a symbol of continuity, a quiet connection to family history she rarely spoke about but always honored. He had never known there was a second piece. never known another existed. Yet here it was, identical in structure, identical in symbolism, and engraved with something unexpected, tiny lettering along the inner rim. N.C. 1996. Daniel stared at the engraving, momentarily unable to speak. The crest confirmed authenticity. The initials introduced a mystery. This necklace did not belong to Isabella. It belonged to someone else within the same bloodline, someone he had never met. Victor leaned slightly forward. "Well?" he asked. Daniel did not immediately answer. He looked up at Nina again, studying her more carefully now. Her eyes remained steady despite her fear. "You said you've had this since childhood," Daniel said slowly. "Yes. Your adoptive parents never explained where it came from?" "No. They only told me I was brought to the hospital wearing it." Daniel's mind moved quickly. Years earlier, Isabella had mentioned losing contact with extended relatives in Europe after complicated family disputes. Old aristocratic families often buried uncomfortable truths rather than explain them. Secrets were inherited as often as jewelry. "Do you know what this symbol represents?" Daniel asked. Nina shook her head. "No. This crest," he said quietly, "belongs to my wife's family." Nina blinked, confusion spreading across her face. "I've never met your wife." "I know." His answer came too quickly. Daniel studied her face again. There were similarities, not identical features, but echoes. Something in the eyes, something in the quiet way she held her posture when uncertain. Traits older generations recognized instinctively. Family resemblance rarely required perfect symmetry. Victor's voice cut gently into the silence. "Daniel, coincidences do happen." "Yes," Daniel replied calmly, "but family crests do not." Nina's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of her tray. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said softly. "I came here to work." Daniel nodded slowly. "I believe you." The word surprised even him, but the evidence in his hand could not be ignored. He carefully returned the necklace, put it back on. Nina hesitated. "Why?" "Because until I understand why you possess a Romano family heirloom," Daniel said quietly, "you are safer wearing it than hiding it." Victor was the first to recover his composure. "In private," he said quietly, adjusting the cuff of his navy jacket with practiced elegance. "We should continue this conversation in private." Daniel did not respond immediately. His eyes remained on Nina, studying her with a level of focus that made her feel as if every detail of her existence were being quietly catalogued, not as a threat, as a puzzle. "Mr. Beaumont," Daniel said without raising his voice. The restaurant manager appeared almost instantly, his polished demeanor strained, but intact. Men like him built careers on anticipating discomfort before it surfaced. "Yes, Mr. Romano. The young lady will be stepping away from the floor for the remainder of the evening." Mr. Beaumont nodded quickly. "Of course." Nina's stomach tightened. Stepping away did not sound like a choice. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. Daniel's tone softened slightly, though his authority remained unmistakable. "No," he replied. "But something has happened, and I intend to understand what it is." Victor gestured politely toward a quiet corridor leading away from the dining room. "This way," he said. Nina hesitated only briefly before following. Every instinct told her that refusing would only complicate a situation she barely understood. The private lounge beyond the main hall reflected the tastes of an older generation that valued tradition over novelty. Leather chairs aged gracefully with use. Framed photographs of Chicago from the 1960s lined the walls. A decanter of bourbon rested beside heavy crystal tumblers, the kind of detail appreciated by men who preferred substance over trend. Daniel closed the door behind them. For a moment, no one spoke. Nina remained standing, unsure whether she had been invited to sit. Victor took a chair first, signaling controlled normalcy. Daniel remained standing. "You said the necklace has been with you since childhood," Daniel began calmly. "Yes. You have never removed it?" "No. Not even once?" Nina shook her head. "My adoptive mother told me it might be important someday." Daniel's expression shifted slightly. "What exactly did she say?" "That the woman who brought me to the hospital insisted it never be taken from me." Victor leaned forward slightly. A woman brought you? Nina nodded. I don't remember her clearly, only pieces. Daniel moved closer, his voice quieter now. What pieces? Nina concentrated. She smelled like rain and perfume, something floral. Her brow tightened. She was injured. Daniel's pulse quickened. Injured how? I don't know exactly. I was very young, but I remember blood on her sleeve. Victor's fingers tapped once against the armrest before becoming still again. And she left you at a hospital? Victor asked. Yes. Which hospital? St. Mary's, Joliet. Daniel and Victor exchanged a brief glance. St. Mary's had closed years ago. Records from smaller regional hospitals were often incomplete, particularly from decades earlier. Your adoptive parents, Daniel said carefully, are they still living? No. Any surviving relatives? No. The simplicity of her answer made the silence heavier. Nina had learned early that life did not always provide extended support systems. You understand why this situation is unusual, Daniel said. Yes. You also understand that possessing an heirloom tied to my wife's family raises questions that cannot be ignored. I understand. Victor spoke gently, almost reassuringly. No one is accusing you of wrongdoing. Nina looked at him. It felt like I was being accused. Victor offered a diplomatic smile. Emotions sometimes speak louder than intention. Daniel did not smile. Instead, he walked toward the small bar in the corner of the lounge and poured 2 glasses of water. He handed one to Nina. Older men often extended courtesy even during tension. Respect was not weakness. It was control. Tell me everything you remember, Daniel said. Nina hesitated. There isn't much. Start anywhere. She took a small sip of water. I remember being told not to cry. Her voice softened. I remember the woman saying, family is not always who raises you. Daniel felt the words settle uncomfortably into his chest. Nina continued. She told me the necklace would help someone recognize me one day. Victor's posture stiffened slightly. Recognize. Not protect. Recognize. Did she mention any names? Daniel asked. I don't remember. Anything about where you came from? No. Victor leaned back slightly, studying Nina more closely now. Children often misinterpret memories, he said. Nina looked at him calmly. I know the difference between imagination and memory. Daniel observed the exchange carefully. Something about Nina's composure did not match manipulation. She did not over-explain, did not dramatize, did not attempt to persuade. She simply answered, the way people often did when they had nothing to hide. You said the necklace was with you when you arrived at the hospital, Daniel continued. Yes. And the engraving? My adoptive mother told me it was already there. Daniel nodded slowly. The year engraved matched Nina's birth year, which meant the necklace had likely been created specifically for her. Family pieces were often commissioned at birth, a tradition among certain European families Isabella once described. Victor cleared his throat lightly. Daniel, we must consider practical possibilities, he said carefully. If there is a connection to Isabella's family, it may explain why the piece exists, but it does not explain how it reached this young woman. Daniel's gaze remained on Nina. How long have you worked at Obsidian Hall? 3 months. Who hired you? The restaurant manager. You did not apply specifically because of me? No. Victor's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Coincidences rarely aligned so precisely, yet nothing in Nina's behavior suggested planning. If someone were attempting to manipulate access to you, Victor said thoughtfully, they would likely prepare a more sophisticated narrative. Nina shifted slightly. I don't know anything about manipulation. Daniel studied her face again. There was fear, but not calculation. You said someone broke into your apartment, he said. Yes. When? 2 nights ago. Did they take anything? No. Did they damage anything? They searched. What were they looking for? I don't know. Victor's fingers tightened slightly around the armrest. And you came to work tonight as usual? I need the job. The honesty in her answer carried quiet dignity. Older generations understood that work was not merely income, it was independence. Daniel nodded slightly. You will not be returning to your apartment tonight. Nina blinked. I can't afford a hotel. You will not need one. Victor glanced briefly toward Daniel. A precaution? He asked. Daniel's response was simple. A responsibility. Nina's heart began to beat faster again. She did not fully understand what was happening, only that her life had just shifted in a direction she could not predict. Daniel stepped closer once more. Until I determine why you possess a Romano family heirloom, he said calmly. Your safety becomes my concern. Nina hesitated. Why? Daniel answered without hesitation. Because family matters. The words lingered in the quiet lounge. Family. A concept Nina had never fully possessed. Yet now, somehow, standing in a room she would never normally enter, she felt its weight for the first time. Outside the closed doors, Obsidian Hall resumed its usual rhythm. But inside, the past had begun rearranging the future. Daniel Romano did not leave the private lounge immediately. He stood beside the tall window overlooking the quiet Chicago street, hands resting lightly in the pockets of his tailored coat, posture calm but unmistakably alert. The city lights reflected faintly against the glass, distorted by the thin mist that often settled over the lake during autumn evenings. Behind him, Nina sat carefully on the edge of the leather chair, unsure whether she was being protected or quietly detained. Victor remained composed, but his silence had grown heavier. Older men understood when situations had crossed into territory where politeness no longer governed outcomes. Daniel finally spoke without turning around. You said someone entered your apartment 2 nights ago. Yes, Nina answered. Tell me exactly what you saw when you returned home. She hesitated briefly, gathering the memory piece by piece. The door wasn't forced, she said. That's what scared me first. Victor's gaze sharpened slightly. No signs of break-in? He asked. No. Nothing stolen? No. Daniel turned slowly now, his expression unreadable. They were searching. Nina continued quietly. Drawers were open. My closet had been emptied onto the floor. My mattress was pushed aside. What did they ignore? Daniel asked. My laptop. Your phone? Still there. Cash? I don't keep much, but yes, untouched. Victor leaned forward slightly, so whoever entered knew exactly what they were looking for. Nina nodded. I think so. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When did you last mention the necklace to anyone? Never, Nina replied immediately. I don't talk about it. It's just part of me. Daniel believed her. People who intended deception often over-explained. Nina did not. She answered simply. Directly. Victor stood slowly and walked toward the small bar, pouring himself a modest glass of bourbon. The subtle gesture reflected generational habits men raised to think carefully before speaking. If the intruder was searching for the necklace, Victor said thoughtfully, then someone must have known she possessed it. Daniel did not respond. Instead, he studied Nina again with the same quiet intensity. How long have you lived at your current address? He asked. Almost 2 years. Roommates? No. Friends who visit frequently? No. Victor turned slightly. You keep a small social circle. I work most of the time. Daniel nodded once. That answer matched her financial reality. Older Americans often respected individuals who worked relentlessly to maintain independence. What about the night the woman brought you to the hospital? Daniel asked carefully. Nina's brow furrowed slightly. I don't remember the hospital clearly, she admitted. Most of what I know comes from what my adoptive parents told me later. Tell me what they said. Nina clasped her hands together. They said the woman refused to give her name. She only said the necklace must remain with me. Victor's expression remained neutral. But Daniel noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. Did she mention family? Daniel asked. Yes. What exactly did she say? Nina's voice softened. She said, family sometimes survives in silence. Daniel's eyes darkened slightly. Silence had defined much of Isabella's relationship with her extended relatives. Old European families often buried painful truths to preserve appearances. Victor spoke carefully. We must consider the possibility that the woman was not connected to Isabella's family directly. Daniel's tone remained calm, and yet the crest exists. Victor did not argue. The evidence was undeniable. Daniel placed both hands lightly on the back of the chair across from Nina, leaning forward slightly, not aggressively, but with focused intent. Do you recall any other detail? He asked. Only one, Nina said. Daniel waited. She told me not to trust anyone who asked too many questions about the necklace. Victor's fingers paused briefly against the glass he held, a detail small enough to dismiss, large enough to matter, Daniel noticed. You have not mentioned the necklace to anyone at Obsidian Hall? Daniel asked. No. Not even casually? No. Not to coworkers? No. Victor's voice remained smooth. Daniel, we cannot conclude anything yet. Daniel agreed, but uncertainty rarely prevented preparation. He reached for his phone and sent a short message. Within seconds, a reply appeared. Daniel read it quietly, then placed the phone back into his pocket. You will not return to your apartment tonight, he said again. Nina shifted slightly. I still have a shift tomorrow morning at the bakery. You will not be working tomorrow. Her instinctive response surfaced quickly. I need the income. Daniel's expression softened slightly, not with pity, but with recognition. People over 45 understood financial responsibility deeply. Work was dignity. Dependence was avoided whenever possible. That concern has already been addressed, Daniel said. Nina blinked. I didn't ask for help. I did not offer help, Daniel replied calmly. I removed an obstacle, Victor observed silently. Daniel rarely explained decisions twice. Nina hesitated. I don't want charity. Daniel nodded once. This is not charity. Then what is it? Precaution. Victor set the glass down gently. If someone searched her apartment, the risk is not theoretical, he said. Daniel agreed. Until we understand why someone would search for a family heirloom believed lost decades ago, we proceed carefully. Nina listened quietly, still struggling to understand why her life had suddenly become the subject of strategic discussion. I don't know anything about your family, she said honestly. Daniel's voice remained steady. That may be precisely why you are in danger. The word settled heavily. Danger. A concept Nina had spent most of her life avoiding through discipline and caution. Now it had arrived anyway. Victor spoke again, his tone measured. If this necklace connects to Isabella's lineage, there may be individuals who prefer that connection remain hidden. Daniel nodded slightly. Older families often carried complicated histories, financial disputes, inheritance conflicts, political complications. Secrets rarely remained buried forever. Daniel extended his hand slightly. Do you trust your instincts? Nina considered the question carefully. Yes. Do they tell you this situation is accidental? She hesitated. No. Daniel nodded once. Then neither do mine. Outside the window, the Chicago skyline shimmered against the dark water of Lake Michigan, a city built by generations who believed persistence mattered more than luck. Daniel looked at Nina once more. For the first time, the possibility forming in his mind no longer felt abstract. It felt personal. You said the woman who brought you to the hospital was injured, he said quietly. Yes. How seriously? She was bleeding. Daniel's voice lowered. Do you remember where? Nina closed her eyes briefly, concentrating. Her side. Victor remained still. Daniel's pulse slowed into something colder. Isabella had died from injuries sustained in what was officially ruled an accident, yet details of that night had never fully aligned. You may not realize this yet, Daniel said carefully, but your presence tonight may have reopened something that was never truly resolved. Nina met his gaze. I didn't come looking for trouble. I believe you. Then why does this feel like the beginning of something bad? Daniel considered the question honestly. Because truth often begins that way. Victor remained silent. Daniel's decision had already been made. You will stay at the Romano residence tonight, he said. Nina hesitated. I don't belong in a place like that. Daniel's response was simple. You may belong there more than either of us understands. The room grew quiet again. For years, Daniel had lived with unanswered questions. Tonight, one of those questions had walked into his life, wearing a sapphire that refused to remain forgotten. The drive to the Romano residence unfolded in silence that felt heavier than conversation. Nina sat in the back seat of the black sedan, hands folded carefully in her lap, her mind replaying every word Daniel had spoken inside the lounge. Chicago's nightlights blurred past the tinted windows, familiar streets, suddenly feeling distant from the life she had known only hours earlier. She had never ridden in a car like this before. The leather interior smelled faintly of cedar, and something expensive she could not name. The driver kept both hands steady on the wheel, posture upright, eyes forward. No radio. No unnecessary noise. Daniel sat beside her, composed once again, though something distant lingered in his expression, the look of a man assembling pieces of a puzzle he had never expected to see completed. Victor followed in a separate vehicle. Neither man had explained why. Older generations often valued privacy in serious matters. Not everything required discussion in the open. Nina watched the skyline fade as the car moved north along Lake Shore Drive, the dark expanse of Lake Michigan stretching endlessly beside them. The rhythm of passing streetlights reflected briefly across the sapphire resting against her collarbone, reminding her that everything had changed because of something she had never questioned before tonight. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You live alone." It was not a question. Yes. No siblings. No. No extended family. No. Daniel nodded slowly. Your adoptive parents. They never discussed the necklace in detail. No. What about photographs? Documents? My adoption records were sealed. Daniel leaned slightly back, his gaze thoughtful. In certain families, heirlooms are created in pairs, he said quietly. Nina listened carefully. One piece remains with the elder child. The other is prepared for the younger. She hesitated. You think my necklace belonged to your wife's family? I do not think, Daniel replied. I know. The certainty in his voice made her uneasy. But your wife never mentioned a sister. Daniel did not respond immediately. Isabella rarely spoke about her childhood. When she did, her tone carried a careful distance, as if certain memories were better acknowledged briefly and then returned to silence. She once told me she lost contact with part of her family when she was very young, Daniel said finally. Legal disputes, custody complications. Situations often become complicated when wealth is involved. Nina looked down at the pendant. I don't remember being part of any wealthy family. That would not be unusual. Why? Because sometimes removing a child is considered protection. The car slowed as iron gates appeared ahead, opening smoothly as the vehicle approached. The Romano residence stood beyond carefully maintained trees, its architecture understated but unmistakably permanent. Stone, not glass. Tradition, not trend. Older men often invested in structures meant to last longer than they would. The driver stopped beneath a covered entrance. A woman in her 60s opened the front door before the car engine fully quieted. Her posture reflected decades of professional discipline. Good evening, Mr. Romano. Margaret, Daniel acknowledged politely. His tone shifted subtly in the presence of familiar staff, respectful, measured. Might we prepare the East Wing guest room? Of course. Margaret's eyes moved briefly toward Nina, not with curiosity, but with practiced discretion. Staff in households like this understood boundaries instinctively. Daniel gestured gently. You will be comfortable here tonight. Nina stepped inside slowly, unsure where to direct her attention first. The entrance hall carried a quiet elegance designed for longevity rather than display. Oil paintings framed in dark wood lined the walls. A grandfather clock marked time with steady precision. The faint scent of polished oak lingered in the air. Nothing felt temporary. Everything felt inherited. This way, Margaret said kindly. Her voice held warmth developed through years of assisting guests who often arrived under complicated circumstances. Nina followed her upstairs, the soft carpet absorbing each careful step. Inside the guest room, subtle details spoke of consideration rather than extravagance. Fresh linens, soft lighting, a small writing desk near the window. Margaret paused near the doorway. If you require anything, simply press the call button beside the bed. Thank you, Nina said quietly. Margaret nodded once before leaving, closing the door softly behind her. For the first time since the confrontation at the restaurant, Nina allowed herself to breathe fully. The room felt safe. But unfamiliar safety could sometimes feel as unsettling as danger. Downstairs, Daniel entered his private study. Victor was already waiting. You believe she is connected, Victor said calmly. Daniel poured a small measure of scotch, though he did not immediately drink it. The crest confirms it, Victor considered carefully. Family connections can be misinterpreted. Not this one. Daniel opened a locked drawer and removed a velvet-lined box. Inside lay Isabella's necklace, the twin piece, the same sapphire, the same setting. The same ancient crest, 2 heirlooms created decades earlier, only given to blood descendants. Victor studied the jewelry carefully. I was not aware there were 2. Neither was I. Daniel closed the box slowly. Which means Isabella chose not to tell me. Victor's voice remained neutral. Perhaps she intended to explain eventually. Perhaps Daniel placed the box back into the drawer. Or perhaps she believed revealing the truth would place someone in danger. Victor nodded thoughtfully. You believe that danger still exists. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. Someone searched Nina's apartment. Victor remained silent. The implication required no elaboration. Daniel looked toward the dark window. For 2 years, Isabella's death has remained incomplete. Victor chose his words carefully. The official investigation found no indication of foul play. Daniel's response was quiet. The official investigation also failed to account for a missing family heirloom. Victor did not argue. Daniel rarely speculated without reason. If Nina is connected to Isabella's lineage, Victor said slowly, others may also know. Daniel nodded once. And if others know, they may believe she possesses information. Victor understood immediately. He also understood what Daniel had not yet said aloud. Heirlooms are rarely separated from documentation, Victor observed. Exactly. Daniel finally lifted the glass of scotch but only held it thoughtfully. In certain families, jewelry accompanies records. Records of what? Inheritance structures, trust accounts, legal claims. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. You believe someone is searching for documentation tied to the necklace. I believe someone believes Nina possesses something of value. Victor considered the possibilities. And you believe her arrival tonight was not coincidence. Daniel's voice remained steady. No. Victor leaned back slightly. Then the question becomes, who knew where to find her? Daniel did not answer immediately. Because the answer carried implications neither man wished to voice prematurely. Upstairs, Nina stood beside the window, looking out across the unfamiliar grounds. She had spent most of her life believing stability was something other people possessed. Yet tonight, she had entered a world defined by legacy rather than survival. Her fingers touched the sapphire gently. For years, it had simply been part of her identity. Now it had become something else. A question waiting for an answer. Below, Daniel remained awake long after midnight. For the first time in 2 years, the past no longer felt sealed. Some truths did not disappear. They waited patiently, until the right person unknowingly carried them back into the light. Nina woke before sunrise, unsure for a moment where she was. The quiet was unfamiliar. Her apartment near the elevated train tracks rarely allowed silence to settle completely. There was always the distant vibration of metal against rail, the hum of traffic, the muted sounds of neighbors beginning their day too early or ending it too late. Here, the air itself seemed still. Soft gray light filtered through the tall curtains, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. For several seconds she remained motionless beneath the unfamiliar linen sheets, her mind slowly returning to the events of the previous evening. The restaurant. Daniel Romano. The necklace. Family. Danger. The words still felt unreal. She sat up slowly, the sapphire resting cool against her skin, as it had every morning for most of her life. Habit guided her fingers to the pendant, reassuring herself it was still there, still real. A quiet knock sounded at the door. "Miss Carter?" Margaret's gentle voice carried through the wood. "Yes," Nina replied quickly. "Breakfast is prepared whenever you are ready. Mr. Romano asked that you not feel rushed." Nina glanced toward the clock. 6:15 a.m. Earlier than she expected anyone in a house like this to be awake. "Thank you," she said. Margaret paused briefly before adding, "Coffee is already prepared. I took the liberty of making it the American way." The small detail felt unexpectedly comforting, normal. Nina dressed in the same clothes she had worn the night before, smoothing the fabric carefully, unsure how to present herself in a place where every detail seemed deliberate. When she entered the dining room, Daniel was already seated at the far end of the long table, reading from a tablet while a simple breakfast rested untouched before him. Black coffee, whole grain toast, fresh fruit. Older habits often reflected discipline developed over decades. Daniel looked up as she approached. "You slept?" Yes. Good. Margaret poured coffee quietly and withdrew without interruption. Nina noticed Daniel did not immediately speak again. He allowed her time to sit, time to adjust, time to feel less like an intruder. You are accustomed to early mornings, he observed. I work 2 jobs. He nodded once. Independence requires effort. Yes. Daniel set the tablet aside. I had preliminary inquiries made regarding your adoption. Nina stiffened slightly. You did that overnight? Yes. Is that legal? Daniel's expression remained calm. Information can often be located through lawful means when handled properly. Nina accepted the answer without pressing further. What did you find? Very little. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Records from St. Mary's Hospital were partially transferred when the facility closed in 2008. Some files were lost. Some archived. Lost? She repeated. Misplaced? Daniel clarified carefully. Paper documentation does not always survive administrative transitions. Nina wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup. My adoptive parents never pushed for more information. Why? They believed what mattered was who raised me, not where I came from. Daniel considered that quietly. Older generations often valued gratitude over curiosity, but unanswered questions rarely remained quiet forever. Margaret mentioned you studied accounting, Daniel said. Community college. You did not finish. I couldn't afford to continue. Daniel nodded slightly. Financial interruption often changed life trajectories. What interested you about accounting? I like patterns, Nina admitted. Patterns reveal truth. Daniel allowed the faintest hint of approval to cross his expression. Isabella used to say something similar. Nina hesitated. You speak about her often, only when necessary. He paused briefly. My wife believed numbers told stories people tried to hide. Nina nodded. They do. Daniel studied her more carefully now. You understand why that concerns me? Yes, because if someone searched your apartment, they may believe you possess more than a necklace. I don't. Perhaps not intentionally. The distinction mattered. Nina placed the cup down carefully. I wish I could tell you more, she said quietly. Daniel believed her. What you remember may return gradually, he replied. Memory often protects itself until context appears. Nina looked down briefly. My adoptive mother used to say the same thing. Daniel reached into a leather folder beside him and removed a photocopy of a document. Your adoption record indicates the intake report included a brief medical observation. Nina leaned forward slightly. What observation? Bruising on the child's left wrist. Her breath caught. I remember that. What do you remember? A bracelet. Daniel's attention sharpened. What kind of bracelet? I don't know. Something thin. Metal? I think so. Do you remember what happened to it? My adoptive mother said the hospital removed it. Was it returned to you? No. Daniel nodded slowly. Another missing object. Heirloom sets were rarely limited to a single item. Victor entered the room quietly, carrying a slim folder. I've requested access to archived family registries, Victor said calmly. Daniel accepted the folder. If Nina's necklace originated from Isabella's maternal lineage, records may exist documenting sibling allocations. Nina listened carefully, still struggling to understand how her life had suddenly intersected with centuries-old family systems she had never imagined being part of. Registries? She asked. In older European families, Victor explained, lineage documentation was maintained meticulously. Daniel opened the folder, scanning quickly. There was mention of a younger female relative separated during legal proceedings, he said. Nina's chest tightened. Separated? Custody dispute, Victor added gently. Situations involving inheritance sometimes become complicated. Nina absorbed the information slowly. You think that child might have been me? Daniel met her gaze directly. I believe the possibility exists. The words carried both weight and restraint. Daniel did not state conclusions prematurely. He allowed facts to assemble naturally. Nina hesitated. Why would someone search for me now? Daniel answered honestly. Because something may have changed. What? I intend to find out. Victor remained quiet. Daniel continued. In families where assets span generations, documentation often determines control. Nina's voice lowered. You think someone believes I have a claim. I think someone believes you possess something they want. Nina instinctively touched the necklace again. This is all I have. Daniel's tone remained steady. Sometimes that is enough. The room fell quiet once more. Outside, early morning light stretched across the lake. Chicago awakened slowly, unaware that within the Romano residence, a decades-old question had begun reshaping itself into something undeniable. For most of her life, Nina Carter had believed she came from nowhere. Now evidence suggested she came from somewhere very specific, and someone else had realized it too. Daniel did not rush the next step. Older men who had built influence over decades understood that reacting too quickly often benefited those who preferred confusion over clarity. Patience was not hesitation. It was discipline. Late that afternoon, the Romano study felt different than it had the night before. Sunlight stretched across shelves of leather-bound books collected over years of quiet habit rather than display. The room smelled faintly of paper, oak, and the subtle trace of bergamot from the tea Margaret had prepared earlier. Nina sat across from Daniel at the long table, a legal pad placed neatly before her, though she had not written anything yet. Victor stood near the window, reviewing several printed documents recently delivered by courier. European family registries are not always digitized, Victor said calmly, particularly older aristocratic lines that prefer discretion. Daniel nodded slightly. Discretion often hides conflict. Victor placed the documents on the table. Isabella's maternal family maintained property records in northern Italy until the late 1990s. Several legal disputes appeared during that period regarding guardianship and asset distribution. Nina listened carefully, absorbing terminology that felt foreign but strangely connected to her life. Guardianship, disputes over what? She asked. Victor's tone remained neutral. Control. Daniel turned one of the pages slowly. The DeLuca family maintained a private trust structure designed to protect inheritance lines across multiple generations. Nina shifted slightly in her seat. I don't have any inheritance. Daniel did not smile. That is not the same as saying you were not intended to. Victor continued. One record references an unnamed minor removed from the primary household following internal legal proceedings. Nina's fingers tightened slightly around the pen she had not yet used. Removed, Daniel answered carefully. In some families, separation is considered protection. Nina's voice lowered. Protection from what? Daniel's eyes lifted briefly toward Victor before returning to her. Internal conflict. The phrase carried more meaning than explanation. Victor turned another page. A secondary notation indicates preparation of twin heirloom items commissioned at birth for both female children. Nina instinctively touched the sapphire again. Daniel reached for the velvet box and placed Isabella's necklace beside Nina's on the table. Side by side, the similarities became unmistakable. Same stone cut, same platinum structure, same nearly invisible crest. Only the engravings differed. I.R. 1992. N.C. 1996. Nina studied the markings quietly. I never knew there was another, she said. Neither did I, Daniel replied. Victor spoke carefully, which suggests the existence of the second necklace was intentionally concealed. Daniel nodded once, possibly to protect the younger child from inheritance disputes. Nina's expression grew uncertain. You think someone wanted me hidden? Daniel answered honestly. I believe someone wanted control. Victor tapped lightly on the margin of one document. There is another detail. Daniel looked up. An accounting irregularity appears approximately 6 months before Isabella's accident. The word accident lingered uncomfortably in the room. What kind of irregularity? Daniel asked. A trust transfer request involving dormant family holdings. Nina listened carefully, recognizing the terminology. Dormant trusts usually activate when a beneficiary becomes legally identifiable, she said. Daniel looked at her with quiet interest. You understand this structure? It's basic fiduciary logic. Victor nodded slightly. The transfer request was flagged but not completed. Why? Daniel asked. The documentation lacked confirmation of the secondary beneficiary's identity. Nina's breath slowed, meaning they couldn't locate me. Victor gave a small nod. Daniel's voice remained calm. And someone recently began searching again. Victor placed another sheet forward. 2 months ago, A legal inquiry was submitted requesting access to sealed adoption records from St. Mary's Hospital archives. Nina's eyes widened. Who requested it? Victor's expression remained composed. The request was submitted through an intermediary firm. Daniel's tone sharpened slightly. Which firm? Victor read carefully. Hale and Mercer Financial Advisory. Silence settled heavily between them. Victor's own firm. He did not react outwardly. Daniel's gaze remained steady. Explain, Daniel said calmly. Victor's voice did not falter. The request originated from a junior associate. Routine genealogical tracing for asset verification purposes. Daniel did not interrupt. Victor continued. It appears the associate encountered reference to dormant trust activation conditions tied to an unnamed beneficiary born in 1996. Nina looked between them. You were looking for me? Victor met her gaze calmly. The firm handles multiple generational trusts. We track lineage irregularities routinely. Daniel's voice remained controlled. Why was I not informed? Victor paused briefly. The inquiry did not initially appear significant. Daniel's eyes did not move. Until when? Victor answered carefully. Until last week, when the search returned partial confirmation that sealed Illinois records referenced a minor female admitted to St. Mary's Hospital matching the year of birth. Nina's voice grew quieter. So someone knew I existed. Victor nodded slightly. Yes. Daniel's tone cooled further. And someone searched her apartment 2 nights ago. Victor remained still. Daniel's voice did not rise. You see the problem? Victor chose his words carefully. The firm did not authorize any external action. Daniel believed that. Victor rarely acted impulsively. But information traveled, sometimes faster than intended. Who else accessed the inquiry file? Daniel asked. Victor slid another document forward. A limited number of internal analysts. Daniel scanned the names quickly. Most were familiar. One was not. A recently contracted consultant. Temporary, external clearance. Daniel placed the page down slowly. When did this consultant join the firm? 3 months ago. The same month Nina began working at Obsidian Hall. Coincidence rarely aligned that precisely. Nina spoke quietly. I never told anyone about the necklace. Daniel nodded. I believe you. Victor's voice remained composed. If someone connected the trust inquiry to a possible living beneficiary, they may have attempted independent verification. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. By breaking into her home, Victor did not argue. Daniel stood slowly, walking toward the window, overlooking the lake. 2 years ago, Isabella began reviewing trust documentation connected to her maternal lineage. Victor listened carefully. She mentioned irregular ledger patterns. Victor nodded once. Yes. Daniel turned back. She never explained what she found. Victor remained silent. Daniel's voice lowered. And then, she died. The room felt colder. Nina did not speak. Victor adjusted his glasses slightly. The official investigation found no evidence of financial motive. Daniel's answer came quietly. Official investigations sometimes overlook subtle incentives. Nina looked down at the necklace once more. Her entire life had felt ordinary, limited, predictable. Now every detail seemed connected to something hidden, something valuable enough for strangers to search her apartment, something powerful enough to remain buried for decades. Daniel's voice softened slightly when he spoke again. You did nothing wrong. Nina nodded faintly. But something wrong may have been done to you. Victor closed the folder. If the dormant trust was reactivated, someone may believe Nina possesses documentation required to validate the claim. Nina shook her head. I don't have any documents, Daniel replied quietly. Perhaps not knowingly, Victor added carefully. Sometimes information is embedded within objects. Nina touched the pendant again. You think something is hidden in the necklace? Daniel did not answer immediately, because the possibility had already crossed his mind. Family heirlooms were rarely only symbolic. They were sometimes designed to protect more than memory. They protected leverage, and leverage often protected power. Daniel's voice became steady once more. We will examine every detail carefully. Nina hesitated. Why help me? Daniel answered without hesitation. Because Isabella believed family deserved protection. He paused briefly. And because someone has already decided you are important enough to find. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped lower across the lake, casting long reflections across the glass. Inside the study, the past continued revealing itself, one quiet detail at a time. Daniel did not believe in coincidences anymore. That belief had disappeared the night Isabella died. Patterns had replaced chance, motives had replaced accidents, and now, a second heirloom had appeared in the hands of a woman who had spent her life believing she had no past worth tracing. The evening air inside the Romano study felt heavier than before, as if the truth itself required space to breathe. Victor stood beside the long table, hands resting lightly against the polished wood, reviewing the final page of the consultant access log. The name repeated itself twice in the margin. A contracted analyst granted temporary clearance to genealogical trust records. Temporary employees rarely had authority to act independently, but information had a way of attracting attention once its value became visible. Daniel closed the folder slowly. "Tell me everything we know about this consultant," he said. Victor nodded. Contracted through a third-party compliance firm specializing in asset recovery. Background? Finance doctorate. Previously affiliated with offshore litigation teams handling inheritance disputes across European holdings. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Experience with dormant trusts. Yes. History of litigation? Several successful claims involving undisclosed heirs. Nina listened quietly, the language sounding clinical, distant yet somehow describing her life without her consent. "You think this person discovered me through paperwork," she said. Victor answered carefully. "Through pattern recognition." Daniel's voice remained calm. "Professionals trained in asset tracing rarely ignore unresolved lineage gaps." Nina folded her hands together, trying to steady her thoughts. "I didn't even know I was missing." Daniel looked at her. "That is often how such situations begin." Victor turned another page. The consultant accessed registry fragments referencing the DeLuca trust line 2 weeks before the break-in. Daniel's gaze hardened. "Meaning the search accelerated once your identity was partially confirmed." Nina exhaled slowly. "So someone believes I am valuable." Victor responded quietly. "Legally significant," Daniel corrected calmly. "Potentially dangerous to someone." The distinction mattered. Power rarely feared the weak. It feared uncertainty. Daniel stood, moving toward the bookshelf behind his desk. He opened a hidden compartment built seamlessly into the wood paneling and removed a thin archival envelope. Inside rested copies of Isabella's final financial review notes. He placed them carefully on the table. Nina leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting. Even without training, the annotations reflected intelligence shaped by discipline. Cross-referenced figures. Margin symbols. Question marks beside transaction codes. "She was investigating something," Nina said. Daniel nodded once. "She never told me what she found." Victor studied the documents carefully. "These ledger marks indicate concealed disbursement channels." Nina followed the lines. "These numbers repeat," she observed quietly. Victor glanced at her. "Yes, they form mirrored transfer paths," Nina continued, her confidence strengthening as logic replaced fear. Daniel listened carefully. "Explain." "These aren't just payments," Nina said. "They're staged diversions." Victor looked at Daniel briefly. "She's correct." Daniel's voice lowered. "Meaning funds were redirected intentionally." Victor nodded. "Possibly to obscure beneficiary identification." Nina traced the numbers again. "The trust may have been manipulated to prevent the secondary heir from appearing." Daniel considered the implication carefully. "Preventing you from being located." Nina's voice barely rose above a whisper. "So someone wanted me erased. Legally." Victor spoke cautiously. "If the trust activates upon confirmation of dual lineage, control over substantial holdings could shift." Daniel remained still. "How substantial?" Victor did not exaggerate. "Very. Money alone rarely explained secrecy. Influence did." Daniel tapped lightly against the margin of Isabella's notes. "She knew." Victor nodded. She was close to confirming something. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "And then she died." The silence carried weight neither man attempted to soften. Nina spoke carefully. "You think someone killed her because of this?" Daniel did not answer immediately. Older men rarely rushed accusations without evidence. but silence sometimes spoke louder than denial. Victor cleared his throat lightly. We cannot yet establish causation. Daniel's voice remained steady. No, but we can establish motive. Nina felt a chill move across her shoulders. I don't want anything from this family, she said quietly. Daniel looked at her directly. That may not matter. Victor agreed. Legal structures activate regardless of personal preference. Nina lowered her gaze. I just wanted to live normally. Daniel's tone softened slightly. Normal is rarely offered to people placed in complicated positions. Victor closed the folder slowly. The consultant who accessed the records has not responded to contact requests today. Daniel's eyes sharpened. When was the last confirmed activity? Yesterday morning. And now? Unreachable. Daniel understood immediately. People who disappeared after locating sensitive information rarely did so accidentally. Nina's voice trembled slightly. Does that mean someone is trying to hide what they found? Victor answered carefully. It suggests someone wishes to control the timeline. Daniel stood once more. Then we accelerate ours. He turned toward Nina. I want you to try to remember everything your adoptive parents told you about the day you arrived. She nodded slowly. My mother said the woman who brought me in refused treatment. Daniel's attention sharpened. She refused medical care? Yes. What reason did she give? She said doctors ask questions. Victor spoke quietly. Individuals protecting minors often avoid documentation trails. Nina continued. My mother said the woman seemed educated. How so? She spoke carefully, like she didn't want to say too much. Daniel nodded. Controlled communication often signaled awareness of surveillance risk. Did she leave anything else? He asked. Nina thought carefully. There was a piece of paper folded inside the blanket. Daniel leaned forward slightly. What paper? My adoptive mother said it contained only a drawing. Victor exchanged a brief glance with Daniel. A drawing of what? Nina closed her eyes briefly, reaching into fragmented memory. A circle, divided in half. Daniel's voice lowered. The DeLuca crest. Victor's expression grew serious. That symbol rarely appeared outside internal family documentation, meaning whoever left Nina understood exactly what the necklace represented. Daniel spoke carefully. The woman who brought you knew the importance of your survival. Nina's voice softened. She held my hand until I fell asleep. Daniel did not speak for several seconds. Finally, he said quietly, Isabella once told me family is not defined by proximity. Nina looked up. What did she mean? Daniel's expression remained unreadable. She meant blood remembers what distance tries to forget. Victor remained silent. Daniel turned back toward the window overlooking the lake. For 2 years, I believed Isabella's past had closed. His voice lowered. Now I believe someone made sure it never could. Nina felt the weight of the words settle slowly. For most of her life, her story had felt small, limited, unremarkable. Now it appeared her absence had once been necessary. Necessary enough for someone to hide her. Necessary enough for someone else to begin searching again. Victor spoke carefully. If the trust reactivates, those who previously benefited from its dormancy may lose influence. Daniel nodded once. And influence rarely surrenders quietly. Nina exhaled slowly. So what happens now? Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Now we find out who wanted you forgotten. Outside the tall windows, the last light of evening faded across Lake Michigan. Inside the study, 3 people sat at the intersection of past and future, aware that whatever had remained hidden for decades had already begun moving again. Because when power senses vulnerability, it rarely waits politely. The following morning began with tension that could not be disguised by routine. Daniel had arranged for Nina to work inside the library rather than remain idle. Older generations believed purposeful activity prevented unnecessary fear from growing roots. Margaret had prepared a small writing space near the tall windows overlooking the eastern garden, where early spring light softened the room's heavy wood tones. Nina sat surrounded by neatly stacked archival boxes, carefully turning the fragile pages Victor had authorized her to review. The documents were copies, nothing irreplaceable, but each carried fragments of the same family crest engraved on the necklace. A divided circle, half shadow, half light, balance and lineage. Daniel entered the room quietly, a folded newspaper in one hand, his expression calm but focused. There has been movement, he said. Victor followed a moment later, carrying a tablet displaying several encrypted emails. Nina looked up immediately. What kind of movement? Victor placed the tablet gently on the desk, turning the screen toward Daniel first before allowing Nina to see. The consultant who accessed the DeLuca registry did not simply disappear, Victor said carefully. He attempted to transfer data externally. Daniel's jaw tightened. To whom? We are still confirming. Nina felt the room grow colder. So someone tried to sell information about me. Victor's voice remained measured. Information regarding dormant trust activation has value in multiple markets. Daniel spoke quietly. Particularly when control of legacy assets may shift. Victor tapped once on the tablet. Yesterday evening, an anonymous legal inquiry was submitted to a federal oversight office requesting verification of dormant European trust beneficiary identification tied to Chicago-based lineage. Nina frowned slightly. I don't understand, Daniel answered. Someone is attempting to force legal acknowledgement of your existence. Why would they do that? Victor responded. Because forcing recognition triggers disclosure requirements. Disclosure of what? Daniel did not soften the answer. Assets. Nina sat very still. I told you I don't want anything. Victor nodded calmly. Desire is not relevant to contractual obligations. Daniel stepped closer to the desk. Once activated, trust structures must identify beneficiaries publicly. Nina absorbed the implication slowly. Meaning whoever controls the trust loses the ability to hide it. Yes, Victor said. And someone benefits if the process becomes chaotic. Daniel's gaze shifted briefly toward the garden before returning to Nina. Chaos creates opportunity, Victor added quietly, and vulnerability. Nina closed the folder in front of her. Then someone wants me exposed. Daniel's answer was simple. Yes. Victor continued reviewing incoming information. There is more. Daniel nodded slightly. Go on. The consultant's encrypted transmission contained a partial ledger extract. Victor enlarged the file on the tablet. Columns of figures appeared. Nina leaned forward instinctively. These entries mirror the ones Isabella flagged. Daniel's expression hardened, which confirms the consultant accessed the same trust irregularities Isabella identified. Victor nodded. The pattern suggests someone has been siphoning influence from dormant accounts for several years. Nina traced one column carefully. These transfers loop back through shell entities. Daniel observed quietly. You recognize the structure? Yes. Victor looked at her with increased interest. Continue. These routing paths delay identification of final recipients, Nina explained, but they still leave timing patterns. Daniel spoke softly. And timing patterns leave evidence. Victor nodded once. Exactly. Nina followed the figures carefully. This account repeats every 9 months. Victor, look you. That interval often aligns with structured disbursement windows. Daniel's voice lowered, meaning someone has been drawing from the trust while it remained dormant. Victor confirmed. Yes. Nina sat back slowly. So someone benefits from me never being found. Daniel nodded. And now someone else benefits from you being found. Victor added quietly. Competing interests often collide when dormant structures awaken. Nina felt the quiet pressure of realization settling deeper. My existence creates conflict. Daniel did not disagree. But conflict also reveals truth. Victor tapped once more on the screen. There is another development. Daniel waited. A sealed inquiry request has been forwarded to the Illinois State Records Authority. Nina's pulse quickened. That means my adoption file may be opened. Daniel's voice remained steady. Yes. Victor continued. The request originated through a law firm specializing in inheritance litigation. Daniel's tone sharpened slightly. Which firm? Victor read the name carefully. Caro and Bell International. Daniel's eyes narrowed. European ties. Yes. Victor paused. They represented several DeLuca family members during the 1998 custody dispute. Nina's breath slowed. The dispute that separated me. Daniel nodded once. Possibly, Victor added carefully. If the same legal network has resumed activity, the matter may extend beyond financial interest. Daniel understood immediately. Family disputes involving generational wealth often involved power structures far more complex than monetary value. Control of narrative, control of legitimacy, control of legacy. Nina spoke quietly. I don't want to become part of a legal war. Daniel's response remained calm. You may not have a choice. Victor closed the tablet momentarily. Public recognition of your identity could destabilize existing trust control. Daniel nodded. which means someone will attempt to influence the outcome. Nina's fingers tightened slightly around the pendant. For most of my life, this was just a necklace. Daniel's tone softened slightly. For most of its history, it represented continuity, Victor added quietly. And continuity often threatens those who profit from disruption. Daniel walked slowly toward the bookshelf. Isabella once told me, legacy is not measured in money. Nina listened carefully. What did she mean? Daniel removed another archival volume. She believed legacy is measured in what survives attempts to erase it. Victor nodded slightly. Erasure rarely succeeds completely. Daniel returned to the desk. Your presence here confirms that. Nina looked down at the sapphire once more. I never asked to be important. Daniel's answer came gently. Importance is sometimes inherited. Victor reopened the tablet. The legal inquiry will take approximately 48 hours to process. Daniel nodded. Then we use those 48 hours carefully. Nina looked between them. What happens if the records confirm everything? Daniel answered without hesitation. Then those who wished you forgotten will have to decide whether silence still serves them. Victor added, and whether exposure benefits them more. Nina's voice remained steady. I just want the truth. Daniel's expression softened slightly. Truth often arrives quietly. He paused briefly. But it rarely arrives alone. Outside, evening settled slowly across the water. The lake reflecting muted gold beneath the fading sun. Inside the Romano residence, the quiet certainty that something long hidden had begun moving again became impossible to ignore. Because when history reopens old accounts, it does not simply return what was lost, it reveals who feared its return the most. Morning arrived with unusual clarity. Chicago's skyline stood sharply against a pale blue sky, the kind of quiet spring morning that often made people believe life could begin again without announcing itself. Inside the Romano residence, however, calm did not mean peace. It meant preparation. Daniel had been awake long before sunrise. He stood in the study reviewing the final report delivered through encrypted courier just after dawn. The sealed Illinois Records Authority had responded faster than expected. Influence often accelerated processes designed to take weeks. Victor entered silently, already aware of what the envelope likely contained. It's confirmed? Victor asked. Daniel did not immediately answer. He read the final paragraph once more, ensuring interpretation did not distort fact. Yes, he said quietly. Nina Carter was legally identified as biological sibling to Isabella DeLuca Romano. Date of birth matched the engraved heirloom. Custody transfer confirmed under sealed court order. Guardian relocation authorized through emergency petition citing credible threat to minor beneficiary safety. Victor exhaled slowly. Then the separation was intentional. Daniel nodded once. Isabella never lied to me, he said. She simply chose silence. Victor understood. Silence was sometimes protection, sometimes strategy, sometimes sacrifice. Nina entered the study moments later, unaware the truth had already been placed on the table before she spoke a single word. Margaret had insisted she eat breakfast first. Stability mattered when life shifted unexpectedly. Older households understood that decisions were better made when the body was steady. Daniel gestured for Nina to sit. She sensed the gravity immediately. You found something, she said quietly. Daniel placed the document before her. I believe you should read it yourself. Nina hesitated before unfolding the pages carefully. Legal terminology often attempted to remove emotion from human circumstances, but meaning still found its way through the language. Biological relation confirmed. Emergency protective separation authorized. Custodial relocation executed without public record disclosure. Her hands trembled slightly. I had a sister. Daniel corrected gently. You have a sister. Nina's eyes filled with tears she had not expected. For 24 years, I thought I came from nowhere. Daniel's voice remained steady. You came from somewhere carefully hidden, Victor added quietly, and carefully protected. Nina looked up slowly. She knew where I was. Daniel nodded. I believe she always intended to find you again. Nina's voice softened. Why didn't she? Daniel did not offer false comfort. Because something prevented her. The room grew quiet again. For 2 years, Isabella's death had remained categorized as unfortunate circumstance. Now it appeared increasingly unlikely that coincidence alone explained the timing. Victor placed additional documents forward. The dormant trust has now formally reactivated. Nina looked uncertain. What does that mean for me? Victor spoke carefully. It means your existence has been acknowledged within the legal framework governing the DeLuca lineage. Daniel added calmly, it means those who benefited from your absence must now respond to your presence. Nina shook her head slightly. I don't want conflict. Daniel's voice softened. Conflict rarely asks permission. Victor's tablet vibrated quietly. He read the message, expression remaining neutral. The consultant has resurfaced. Daniel looked up. Alive? Yes. Where? Zurich. Daniel considered the implication. European financial centers often became neutral ground when sensitive information changed hands. Victor continued. He has requested legal immunity in exchange for transferring complete ledger records. Daniel nodded slowly. What does he claim to possess? Victor met his gaze. Documentation indicating sustained diversion of DeLuca trust assets across 14 years. Nina felt the magnitude of the situation settling into something real. Someone has been stealing from my family. Daniel answered calmly. Yes. Victor added, and your identification disrupts their ability to continue. Nina's voice remained quiet. So finding me threatens someone powerful. Daniel nodded once. Yes. Nina exhaled slowly. For most of my life, I worried about rent. Daniel's tone carried quiet understanding. Perspective often shifts without warning. Victor placed one final document forward. The Zurich transfer includes original correspondence authored by Isabella. Daniel's hand paused briefly. Correspondence regarding what? Victor spoke carefully. Her intention to locate her sister. Nina's breath caught. She was looking for me. Daniel nodded. Yes. Victor continued. The letters indicate Isabella believed separation occurred under coercion. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. Coercion by whom? Victor answered quietly. A former trustee of the DeLuca estate. Nina's voice barely rose above a whisper. The same trustee who benefited from the trust remaining dormant. Daniel's gaze darkened. Yes, Victor added, and the same trustee represented by Caro and Bell International. The connection was now undeniable. The same legal network seeking to confirm Nina's identity. The same network tied to historical separation. The same network potentially benefiting from Isabella's silence. Nina spoke carefully. She didn't stop looking for me. Daniel's voice remained steady. No, Victor added quietly. She may have come closer than anyone realized. Nina's eyes moved slowly across the room. I wish I could tell her I survived. Daniel answered gently. I believe she already knew. Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Not uncertainty. Clarity. Daniel stood and walked toward the window overlooking Lake Michigan. For 2 years, grief had defined his decisions. Now purpose replaced paralysis. Victor, Daniel said calmly, initiate formal recognition of Nina Carter as DeLuca beneficiary. Victor nodded once. And the consultant? Secure full ledger disclosure. Victor accepted the instruction without question. Nina remained seated, still absorbing the reality of what had changed. I don't know how to be part of a family like this, she admitted quietly. Daniel turned back toward her. Family is not defined by wealth. He paused briefly. It is defined by responsibility. Nina nodded slowly. I don't want revenge. Daniel's expression softened. Neither did Isabella. Victor added thoughtfully. She wanted truth. Nina's fingers rested lightly against the sapphire. For years I thought this necklace was just a mystery. Daniel replied quietly. It was never a mystery. What was it? A message. Nina considered that. A message from who? Daniel's voice lowered. From a sister who refused to let you disappear. Outside, the lake reflected morning light in long silver lines stretching toward the horizon. Inside the Romano residence, what began as confrontation had become recognition. Nina Carter had not entered Daniel Romano's world by accident. She had returned to it, not as an intruder, as family. And family, once found, is rarely lost twice. This story reminds us that truth may sleep for years, but it never truly disappears. Loyalty, love, and justice often move quietly, hidden beneath layers of fear, power, and silence. The necklace symbolizes how family bonds can survive distance, secrets, and even loss. For audiences, especially those who have lived long enough to understand regret and second chances, the message is clear. Real legacy is not money or status, but the courage to protect what is right. Justice does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes through patience, integrity, and the quiet strength to face the truth when it finally returns. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.